Okay, so this is just the detail, which I'm not going to bore you with. We went about it in a really structured way, really grounding it in existing technology management and transitions literature theory. So what we then get to, and this is kind of what I want to share with you, is this key features that we believe is necessary, or that a proposition that we are putting out there of what we should include to understand how we should manage technology in order to facilitate these transitions. So the first key features, this transition value creation. So technology management typically serves the system or then the stakeholders in terms of creating economic value, creating means and ways for a system to function. But technology management, how we should then look at it, is to also understand how do we create value for the transition, and then obviously what does that mean to create value. So this transition value creation, and what we are seeing, we are also now doing work on this in terms of business models. So how do we create value for the transition from a business model? How do we include that in our business model? But this was specifically for technology management. So just a diagrammatic or a schematic representation of this, and what this transition value creation entails is we have a transition perspective. And then essentially what this says is that you have an emerging technology. Again, if you think about this electricity or energy transition, so you have an emerging technology and you have this incumbent technology, which is often difficult to move. So the transition requires something from both of these technology domains, but they also contribute towards the transition. One thing that is important is that transition, of that contribution towards the transition, can be positive or negative. So an incumbent technology typically contributes, if it's a fossil fuel-based technology, typically contributes negatively towards that transition. And then there's risks and opportunities that has to be identified. Importantly, the opportunities. What are the opportunities from these different domains? Kind of again, just saying there are lots of opportunities. And kind of taking these individually, considering the different perspectives, but we also have to consider them together: transition progress, transition capability, and system performance, and understand the integrated nature between them. So transition progress, if we look at that overlap number one, transition progress is part of transition capability. Overlap number two, system performance. So for example, if the system is stable, that adds to the transition capability, the capability of a system to transition. If, for example, a system is unstable or it doesn't have enough capacity, then obviously that negatively impacts the transition capability. And then transition progress, as a system progresses through the transition, the system performance should improve, right? Or if then there's degress in terms of the transition, the system performance again is negatively affected. So understanding the integratedness of these different measurements that is highlighted in literature independently, though, understanding how they're all integrated is important for us to understand how we deal with our technology within these transitions. Then the co-management of your new technology, your emerging technology, and then your incumbent technology, managing those together. The reason why, again, if you think about managing technology, how we typically manage it and how it is portrayed in literature, we have our management techniques for our existing systems, and we have a lot of approaches for emerging technologies, right, your niches. But the way that those technologies are managed, there's not an approach that says we need to combine the management of our incumbent systems and our emerging systems, because that is what we need for transitions, is to actually manage them together. Then context specificity, I think this goes without saying for any system that we want to address, but specifically for transitions and then technology management. The first one that we included is this context specificity in terms of the different phases of a transition. We need to understand that how we manage our technology is different. We need to have different strategies, technology management strategies, based on the different phases that we are in. So currently, technology management is highly geared towards the phases of product development or the business development. It's geared towards those processes, but it's not altered or differentiated in terms of what technology management strategies do we need for the different transition phases. And then also, all systems are different, so we need to find these measures that are translated across different systems. Context specificity is further important because a system exists within a higher system, so you also need to understand that there's a broader ecosystem that you work within. Links to this broader view of sustainability, getting away from a narrow view, broadening that, and then sustainability and transitions will look different in different systems, different contexts. So we need to be context specific, and whatever framework or approach is developed has to have that flexibility in order for it to be able to customize it for specific purposes. Then the last key aspect of the work that we then did was this contribution requirement view, and I alluded to it earlier. I think the other diagram is slightly easier to explain, but this whole idea that there's a requirement, the transition requires something from your technology systems, from your socio-technical systems, but these socio-technical systems also contribute towards this transition, positively or negatively. This is just kind of a detailed elaboration of that concept. So this is then the framework, which again, I won't get into the detail. I'll just briefly run you through where all of these different key aspects fit in. So there's this transition value creation, which you will see has all of these different elements that I mentioned incorporated in it. There's this collective and individual consideration for transition progress, capability, and system performance. It's also embedded and integrated into this framework. And then the co-management, you can see schematically also represented. If we think about how do we manage technology within sustainability transitions, we cannot look at the incumbent or decommissioning fossil fuel plants or thinking about niche management. It has to be together because both of these technology domains play a significant part in our system performance, in our transition capability, et cetera, et cetera. And then context specificity goes for each and every part of the framework, really understanding what is different across systems, what is similar across systems. And then third time I'm mentioning this now, this contribution requirement view, really understanding that there's a give and take, and none of these key features are independent. They are all obviously integrated. We shouldn't make the same mistakes that we've been making, saying let's look at the contribution requirement view, but really looking at all of these key features together. Then, as I mentioned, as if Eskom comes to us and say, okay, but how do we actually use this, or any socio-technical system that is in transition, how do we actually use this theoretical framework behind it? We then went about and saying, okay, but let's do let's put it in an operational, present it in an operational way. So this is then where we ended up. There's literally step 1, step 0, phase 0, step 0.1, step 0.2. I think this is often what we lack from theoretical perspective. We say we need to think about things differently, which is fantastic, and we really need that. But then how do we portray this in a way that a big utility or a big technology company can actually come and use it? So this is then stepwise to say, these are the steps, input, outputs, what you need, the information, input identification, information gathering, et cetera, really assisting with what you need to do to guide you through your technology management process in your transition. So the big reason, back to this, why we are really, why we see this so important, especially in South Africa, we have all of these big technology approaches, but it's really complicated because we have also social unsustainability, economic unsustainability, and institutional unsustainability in South Africa. So we need these slightly complicated, integrated approaches to really address this. But just finally, the challenges that we face, and I hope that you can now see the connections between what I just showed you and what we need. So yes, we have environmental unsustainability in our electricity system, highly dependent on coal, fossil fuels, so a significant contributor to climate change. Then challenges in providing access to reliable and affordable electricity. Electricity is really expensive. Obviously, our demographic, we have a lot of people in South Africa that don't have the financial means to pay for their electricity. And then also reliable energy. If you look at these kind of headlines, we do not have reliable energy, so that has significant impact on our economy. And then a system that supports inclusive economic development and growth. So we have a number of socio-economic challenges linked to our incumbent technology. So how do there's a big skills transfer that needs to happen, all those kinds of socio-economic challenges that we also deal with. And that is what these kind of headlines is what we are trying to, in our small little way, influence to really get a different perspective on our absolute beautiful country.